The German coalition deal is done, with Olaf Scholz set to become Chancellor, bringing an end to the Angela Merkel era. Sweden is reeling after a day that saw the election of its first female Prime Minister followed a few short hours later by the resignation of Magdalena Andersson. We're live in Stockholm for the latest.
Poland says groups of migrants are still trying to illegally enter from the Belarusian border, as both countries are accused of serious human rights abuses.
And I've been catching up with Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, the exiled leader of the opposition in Belarus. She says the EU needs to do more to counter the threat of Alexander Lukashenko.
Booster shot rethink. COVID cases break records in parts of Europe, prompting calls for countries to start offering third jabs. Hello and welcome to the programme. The deal has been done to form a new coalition government, with Olaf Scholz set to become Chancellor on December 6th. The three parties that make up the traffic light coalition, as it's known, the Social Democrats, the Greens and the Liberals, presented their plan for government in Berlin today. With the deal now in place, it brings an end to the Angela Merkel era that lasted 16 years. Incumbent Chancellor Scholz spoke earlier and reaffirmed Germany's commitment to the European Union.
A sovereign Europe is key to our foreign policy. It's our task as an economically strong and populous country in the heart of Europe to enable, promote and advance this sovereign Europe.
Let's bring in Kate Brady, who's in Berlin for us. Kate, great to see you. So the Traffic Light Coalition has been sealed. Who gets what ministries and what's their plan for government?
Well, this new so-called traffic light coalition, named because of the party's three colours that are participating in it, came with a rather nifty slogan as well, saying that they're the Alliance for Freedom, Equality and also Sustainability. And there are indeed elements of that woven into the coalition deal, with a focus especially on social and climate issues. And also there was a lot of talk today about modernisation and a new start for Germany. And it goes without saying that especially during the pandemic, some of Germany's shortcomings really were laid bare, especially when it comes to digitalisation and education, and as well, of course, when it comes to climate policy as well. Some of the forest fires and those deadly floods that we saw over the summer here in Germany really bringing home some of the key issues, and that certainly is being reflected in this new coalition deal. So there are plans, at least in this coalition deal now, to phase out the use of coal-fueled energy by 2030. That would be 8 years earlier than currently planned. But on social issues as well, we're expecting to see the minimum wage rise up to €12 per hour, the legalisation of cannabis as well, a huge issue that's been talked about for a long time. And for migrants here as well, a huge talking point here in Germany today, the fact that people will be able to apply for citizenship here in Germany after living here for only 5 years instead of the current 7. And most importantly of all, they will be able to retain dual citizenship, something that's been a contentious issue for many, many years, especially for the thousands of Turkish Germans here living in the country, and also their descendants as well, who are often forced to choose between either Turkish or German citizenship. But in terms of the ministries, we're still waiting on confirmation of some of them. As you mentioned already, Olaf Scholz, it looks like he's going to be indeed the next German Chancellor. The Bundestag, the German Parliament, will have to vote on that. Annalena Baerbock, she was the Green Party Chancellor candidate. It looks like she's going to be the Foreign Minister. And one of the big sticking points, it seemed for a while, was the Finance Ministry. Big question was whether that was going to go to the business-friendly Free Democrats, or FDP, or to the Greens. In the end, it looks like it's going to the Free Democrats party leader, Christian Lindner. But for a long time, the Greens were concerned that with Lindner in the Finance Ministry, some of their climate policy issues might not get fully implemented. The business-friendly FDP are much more in favour of technological solutions to dealing with climate change, whereas the Greens want to see more state regulation and government investment. But it seems at least there has been a compromise reached there. The Green Party leader, Robert Habeck, is going to take on the rather mammoth ministry of the economy and climate ministry. So it seems that there is some kind of compromise being reached there.
OK, Kate, very briefly, huge issue regarding COVID awaiting the Chancellor. What's the government's plan?
Absolutely. This has been described as a huge shadow hanging over this new government, but we've seen already that they did manage to push through Parliament their new plans. The new infection protection law, as it were, came into force today with some new rules now in place. People being checked on public transport, spot checks at least, on public transport to ensure that they're vaccinated, recently recovered or tested. New rules in the workplace as well today. But it goes without saying, this is still a huge issue and is really going to hang over this new government. Already last night, the party leaders that are included in this new coalition met with Angela Merkel to talk about the severity of the situation here in Germany right now.
OK, Kate, for now, thanks for that. Sweden's first ever female Prime Minister has resigned just hours after being confirmed in office. Magdalena Andersson stood down a short time ago after she lost a budget vote and coalition partners, the Green Party, said they were pulling out of the government. Earlier in the day, Andersson, who had been finance minister and the leader of the Social Democrat Party, was approved as the new Prime Minister by a vote in the Parliament. Let's go to Stockholm to speak to our reporter, Per Bergsfors Nyberg. Per, great to see you. What a day for Swedish politics. Bring us through it.
I'll tell you, Paul, this has been quite a dramatic day. You know, it started looking like a day that was a day of success for Magdalena Andersson, becoming the first female prime minister in the country's history. You know, it's 100 years this year since women were able to vote here in Sweden. So this was a historic day. But then just a few hours later, the Center Party, which supported Andersson this morning, they turned on her, said no to her budget, which meant that the budget from the conservative opposition on the right side of the political spectrum was the budget that was approved by Parliament. But that budget also involves the Sweden Democrats, a far-right party that a lot of parties say they don't want to cooperate with. And one of those parties is this junior coalition party, the Green Party. They said, no, that's one step too far. We're not going to sit in a government and having to rule using this budget that involves the Sweden Democrats. So they jumped off this new government, which meant that Magdalena Andersson had to resign. And now basically she's back to being a finance minister again. So this is a completely unique situation. It's never happened before in Swedish politics that you have a new prime minister that only a few hours later loses a vote for her budget, and then the whole government collapses, and now she just had to resign.
So if you look in your crystal ball, what happens now? What happens next? Can Andersson make a comeback?
Oh, if I only knew, Paul, if I had that crystal ball, that'd be fantastic. But, you know, Stefan Löfven is now back to being the Prime Minister of Sweden. Magdalena Andersson will have to go through another vote for Prime Minister. Everyone thinks that, sure, you know, she passed this vote this morning, so she should be able to pass another vote. That would be for just a single-party government of just the Social Democrats without the Green Party. But, of course, nothing is for certain with the Green Party already having left the coalition government. The Center Party who turned on her, the Sweden Democrats who now want to be a part of the parties that formed the new budget, and of course the Left Party that stood by Magdalena Andersson late last night. We just don't know what all the different parties are going to do as we move forward.
And what was the reaction to when Andersson became Sweden's first female Prime Minister?
Well, I have to say, this was something that a lot of people have waited for a long time. You know, there were some emotional speeches in Parliament today, and Magdalena Andersson herself actually spoke about this earlier in the week. And let's see if we can take a listen and see what she had to say about becoming the first female Prime Minister.
Since I was elected as the new leader of the Social Democratic Party, there have been many moms and dads that have come up to me with their daughters and said, look, this is or could be Sweden's first female Prime Minister. And of course, when I look into the eyes of these girls and I see that this awakens their imagination, this is something I carry with me. This would mean something for these girls growing up in Sweden today. This is something you just can't escape from.
So a historic appointment, of course, for Magdalena Andersson becoming the first female prime minister. She hopes to return to the scene as the prime minister and winning that vote in parliament to actually take office, because, you know, she hadn't even taken office yet before resigning today. So we'll just have to see if she will, in fact, become the actual first prime minister of Sweden, Paul.
Indeed, Per. Many thanks for that update. Thank you. A record surge of COVID-19 cases across the Czech Republic, the Netherlands and Germany has been causing fresh concern. In Bavaria, overwhelmed hospitals are having to send patients elsewhere. The World Health Organization said the situation is very alarming, and the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said we must step up vaccination efforts to control the virus. Judith Prescott reports.
Another COVID-19 patient clings to life in this Czech Republic intensive care unit. The country is going through a record-breaking coronavirus infection wave, reaching close to 26,000 daily cases on Tuesday. Doctors in some hospitals say unvaccinated people now occupy all the ICU beds.
Last week, the situation was such that only 1 patient out of 9 was vaccinated. And now this week, no one is vaccinated. So from my point of view, these numbers certainly show the impact that a vaccination has on the fate of the patient.
The Czech government has brought in new restrictions, targeting those that are still unvaccinated. From Monday, only people who have received the jab or have recovered from COVID-19 will be allowed to attend public events and visit bars and restaurants. Germany, meanwhile, is facing a sombre pandemic milestone. The country is poised to pass 100,000 coronavirus deaths this week. In the Bavaria region, some hospitals have been overwhelmed and needed to move seriously ill patients to other parts of the country. Some politicians have called for the introduction of mandatory vaccines like its neighbour Austria. Booster shots have now become the focus for Brussels. President of the EU Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, has called on governments to provide an extra jab for every adult.
We're very alarmed. We have just surpassed, very sadly, the 1.5 million death mark last week. If we continue on the current course, we are projecting a further over 500,000, 500,000 deaths by spring next year.
Italy was once the epicentre of the virus in Europe and is now once again facing surging infection numbers. The country is set to introduce a super green pass to replace the current COVID-19 pass system.
Still to come, French football is once again in focus after France and Real Madrid star Karim Benzema is convicted over a sex blackmail tape plot. Welcome back to the programme. You're watching Euronews Tonight. Now, Polish authorities have reported that large groups of migrants are still trying to illegally cross the border with Belarus. The latest attempts come as Human Rights Watch accuses both countries of, quote, serious abuses. Matthew in the Cube has been following the story.
Indeed, Paul, although the number of migrants at the Poland-Belarus border has decreased, Warsaw says the situation has not changed. It was on Twitter that the Polish border guard said that on Tuesday evening at around 7 p.m, a large group of around 100 migrants tried to illegally enter the country. You can see on this video that they published part of that border fence has been trampled while armed guards remain on patrol. Meanwhile, nearby at another border village, the border guard says that another group of around 40 migrants twice on Tuesday evening also tried to illegally enter the EU member state. On Twitter, they described this group as aggressive, saying that they threw stones and tree branches at officials and also used things like stun grenades and strobe lights. It is for weeks now that we have seen thousands of migrants, mainly originally from the Middle East, that have been trying to enter the EU member states, Latvia, Lithuania and Poland, which has for weeks led to what NGOs are calling a humanitarian crisis, where at least 11 migrants are known to have died at the border. On Wednesday, Human Rights Watch sent out a report in which they called on both Poland and Belarus to take shared responsibility for the situation at the border. Human Rights Watch accused both governments there of, quote, serious human rights abuses and said that they had a joint responsibility to ensure there were no further deaths. This is what the Human Rights Watch Deputy Director for Europe and Central Asia told Euronews earlier.
While Belarus is very much responsible for orchestrating this crisis, Our research has shown that Poland's actions are exacerbating the suffering that people are experiencing, both because of its pushbacks of migrants and asylum seekers across the border, in some cases repeatedly, and also because it's denying humanitarian access in the border area where it's declared a state of emergency.
Human Rights Watch has called on the European Union to apply more pressure on Poland, not just to allow humanitarian workers to enter and treat those people who are stuck at the border, but also, Paul, to make sure that you have a fair asylum process for the number of people who are still trying to enter the bloc.
Matthew, thank you. Belarus's exiled opposition leader, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, was in Strasbourg today to address the European Parliament. She urged politicians to act, saying sanctions on Belarus are a crucial tool against President Lukashenko's regime, which she says is abusing its citizens. On Tuesday, the EU unveiled new measures to target Lukashenko and the companies Minsk is using to bring people to its border with Poland. Let's cross over to Strasbourg to speak to Shona Murray, who's been speaking with Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. Shona, lovely to see you. Poland has come in for heavy criticism for its treatment of those people stranded on its border with Belarus. What did Belarus's exiled opposition leader have to say about that?
Well, it's an interesting one, Paul, because earlier on in her speech to the European Parliament, she gave thanks to Poland for its hardline position when it comes to Lukashenko and the border, and ensuring essentially that Lukashenko couldn't make way and, I suppose, split the European Union when it comes to this issue. But on the other side, of course, as you mentioned there, Poland comes in for heavy criticism for the way it's treated those migrants, a lot of them children living in sub-zero conditions, appalling conditions. Some children, some people have even died. And I did catch up with her about this, and she said that undoubtedly there is a humanitarian catastrophe on the border. She said she was glad to see that some children are now being brought into centres where they eventually finally have warmth. But at the same time, from her position, obviously she wants to see a hardline position against Lukashenko, not just with Poland, but Lithuania and Latvia. And she also mentioned there, Paul, that the sanctions need to continue. They need to be persistent. She said it shouldn't even just be EU governmental sanctions targeting or blacklisting companies that are involved in the travel or the movement of migrants from the likes of Iraq and Afghanistan to Belarus, but that other companies should by themselves stop doing business with Lukashenko and the Belarusian regime.
Still a lot of businesses around Europe that are collaborating with regime. Just don't be ruled in your policy by money. Be ruled by values. If you stop collaboration for a couple of months, but if you do this together, jointly, simultaneously, it will deprive the regime of money. And this will be the fast end. But just cooperating with them, you are prolonging people's sufferings on the ground, migrant sufferings on the ground. Of course, you will lose something. But look, if people's lives lower in price than your businesses, that's the question.
And Shona, she also spoke to you about her own family situation, didn't she?
That's right. I mean, we know there's a huge human cost to Belarusians who dare speak out or fight against the regime. Hundreds of them are already in prison, and many of them taking their own lives. One of those people is her husband, Sergei. He's in prison at the moment, awaiting a trial. She said he could get 15 to 20 years in prison for something he has never committed. They don't even know the details of it, but she said she lives every day in pain because she has 2 young children, and each day they're asking where their father is.
On one hand, of course, I in everyday pain because of the situation. My children asking me, where is my daddy, especially my younger daughter. Every day we get not very pleasant news from Belarus. One more person detained, another person tried to commit suicide because of awful conditions in jail. My husband is on so-called trial at the moment, he can be sentenced in the nearest day for 15, 20 years. Nobody knows because journalists are not allowed, relatives are not allowed to the trial. So you live in this everyday pain. But on the other hand, you don't lose the intention to fight.
Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, the exiled leader of the opposition in Belarus, speaking to me at the European Parliament in Strasbourg today, Paul, saying that the EU, the international community, needs to be consistent, persistent when it comes to sanctions against the Lukashenko regime. She says hopefully that will eventually lead to fair and free elections. Paul?
OK, Shona, thank you very much. Real Madrid and French national footballer Karim Benzema has been found guilty of complicity in a blackmail scandal. He received a one-year suspended sentence and a €75,000 fine for blackmailing teammate Mathieu Valbuena. 4 other defendants were also convicted, with punishments ranging from an 18-month suspended sentence to 2.5 years in prison. Thomas Blade reports.
A court ruled that in 2015 the player assisted blackmailers who had in their possession a compromising video of Valbuena. During a training camp, a sting operation by French police caught Benzema acting as a middleman between Valbuena and a group who wanted money in exchange for a sex tape involving the player. Benzema has always denied the allegations and insisted he was only trying to help Valbuena. The judge has handed the Real Madrid striker a one-year suspended sentence and ordered him to pay a €75,000 fine. After a brief suspension, Benzema has been brought back into the French squad. But, following this guilty verdict, his future with Les Bleus is uncertain.
Still to come, Iceland is experiencing a major baby boom. We'll tell you what's behind it after the break. Welcome back to the programme. Now, Iceland is bracing for a baby boom, with 2021 set to be a bumper year for newborns. Rebecca Daunt explains why.
Current surveys show that 2021 will eclipse all previous records. While the COVID lockdown may have had an impact on the rapid rise in pregnancies, Professor Simanar Doktor says that there is a more probable reason for the peak.
We've seen, for example, the new parental leave law, under which parental leave has been increased from 9 months to 12.
This is not the first time Iceland has responded to a crisis with a baby boom. After the 2010 banking fiasco and subsequent job losses, the country recorded a sensational rise in births. This time the response is similar, as this young mother explains.
The plan originally was to buy a house, get married and then have children. But because of COVID-19 there was no wedding this year or last, so we decided to just go ahead and have this little one.
It is likely that other young mothers are following this trend and have fulfilled their desire to have children between lockdown and reopening. A record 5,000 babies are expected to be born on the island this year.
That's it for this Euronews Tonight. We'll be back shortly with the headlines. Many thanks for watching.